So in the movie Sophie's Choice, a young Polish immigrant woman named Sophie has an American lover named Nathan, neither of which are completely honest with each other about their past. Nathan, it turns out, is a paranoid schizophrenic, prone to bouts of jealous rage, and Sophie has not been completely honest with Nathan about her past and the time she spent in Auschwitz. They both meet and befriend a new neighbor named Stingo, who is a young budding writer, and the three of them get caught up in somewhat of a love triangle. There's a lot of toxicity because of the secrets that eventually are revealed to Stingo, both through Nathan's brother, who tells him about his mental health issues, and then later Sophie reveals her past to Stingo. So the main choice, and there are several choices that Sophie makes in this movie, but the main choice that I believe the movie gets its title from is when Sophie reveals to Stingo that when she is taken to Auschwitz with her two children, a Nazi general forces her to choose to spare one of her children's lives while sending the other to the gas chamber. Essentially, she can only spare one of her children. And Sophie, in a very heart-wrenching scene, chooses to spare her son, and her daughter is taken off to the gas chambers. So we're going to look at this main choice, and in my paper I cover some of the other choices she makes in the movie as well, but for this video I'm just going to talk about the main choice of sparing one of her children while essentially allowing the other one to die, and look at them from three different ethical theories and philosophy. The first being Kantian ethics. So Kantian ethics says that the only intrinsically good thing is goodwill. And goodwill is motivated by duty and respect for the moral law. So Kantian ethics are kind of vague about what moral law entails, and what duty entails also. So would the duty to protect one's child be considered moral law? For example, I think that, it would be, I think universally most people would say that parents have a duty to protect their children. However, according to Kantian ethics, would the duty to protect one child be superior to the duty to protect another child? And I think that it wouldn't be. So they would be equal. Since Sophie chooses one child over the other, her decision is not, according to Kant, I believe, ethical. So you can also use this code that he uses of determining what would be moral and applying the universal law idea. So could you say that sparing one child for the sake of the other's demise would be a good universal law? I think that most people would say no. And if this were, in fact, universal law, if you could only save one child out of two lives, you could argue that, in fact, bearing more than one children would be immoral. So, additionally, Sophie did not treat her daughter's life as an ends in and of itself, but rather a means to an end, because she sacrificed her child's life in order to save her son. So I think that, according to Kant, her choice would be considered immoral. So looking at the next the next theory of utilitarian ethics. I think in this theory, because it's consequentialist theory, Sophie's choice would be ethical because it did produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So when Sophie chose to save her son's life, her son was the older and the stronger child. And I guess if you could maybe look into Sophie's reasoning and try to determine why she made that decision, you might say that because of those two factors, her son being stronger and being older, that he would stand a greater chance of surviving the labor camps that the children were placed in at the time, where her daughter likely wouldn't. So, in fact, if she would have picked her daughter, it's likely that both children would have died. So, by picking the stronger and older child, at least one child might have a chance of survival. So so then I guess this poses the question, what if the children were identical? In that case, I think her choice ethically by utilitarian ethics wouldn't be as clear. The third theory, virtue ethics, I don't think that choosing either child would be a virtuous act because, and again, this theory I think is pretty vague also because the terms aren't defined. So the term virtue and choosing actions based on what would a virtuous person do, that can be relative person to person and vary. So it's hard to say. But I don't think that most people would agree that a virtuous person would essentially co-sign the murder of an innocent child, even though, she was threatened with her own life, and likely all 3 lives would have been lost if she refused. For the sake of the argument, making that choice, one child over another, would not be a virtuous act. Nor would the act result in happiness, which is another element of virtue ethics, because such an atrocity would leave a virtuous person filled with shame and guilt. So this decision did leave Sophie with shame and guilt, which I believe is why she takes her own life at the end of the movie. So it did not result in her happiness. In virtue ethics, the virtuous choice would be to refuse sparing either child. So I think, according to virtue ethics, making no choice at all, even if it meant risking her children's lives as well as her own life by refusing to make a choice, would, according to this theory, be the most virtuous act. So, thank you.